Because we're good enough, not because we're nice enough, but because God so loved the world that he sent his only Son. My message today is one that may resonate more and more every day that we see the news. And it is, does hope still exist? And I'm here to tell you that, frankly, it is hard to turn on any news or open any newspapers. And for kids, which we don't have any here, but we might have a few on YouTube, newspapers are one of those things we used to get to give us news before smartphones came along. And so it's our news way. But if you turn on any of those news sources, if you turn on a newspaper, you look at it and you say, wow, I don't know if there's any hope left. And I keep thinking, it can't get any worse. And then the next day, it does. In fact, it has gotten to the point that is really the realization that it has only just begun. We are in a world full of wars, political divide, inflation, crime, hate, evil, and they all seem to be expanding everywhere. And that alone would cause you to say, does hope still exist? And I think it's a valid question in hard times. And you're not the first person to ask that question. Solomon, back in Lamentations, way back, asked that same question. We're going to read from Lamentations chapter 3, verses 19 through 23. It says, "Remember my affliction and my wanderings, the wormwood and the gall. My soul continually remembers it and is bowed down before me. But this I call to mind, therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him." Solomon in Lamentations had a very sad. It's a book I don't recommend if you're already depressed, because it's a depressing book. And it's amazing to me that as Solomon is realizing the futility of the world around him, he talks about his affliction, the wormwood and the gall. And he goes from there to the steadfast love of the Lord that never ceases, and says, therefore I will hope in him. You see, perspective is a whole lot to do with hope. And you've heard that word before, perspective, but it is one of those things that so often we look at and we don't picture it as we could. And so I want to give you two examples of perspective. I want to compare Bill Gates and me. Now, there's a little bit of difference between Bill Gates and me. Actually, there's a lot of difference. If Bill Gates was to look at me, I think he would look at me and think, wow, what a poor person. He hardly has anything. He doesn't even have a Learjet, and I have several Learjets. And if I look at Bill Gates and I see all his Learjets, I kind of wonder, well, God, why does he have so many Learjets and I don't even have one? And that perspective tends to make me a little discouraged because, wow, I don't have. Now, before someone goes rushing out to get a GoFundMe to get my Learjet, don't worry, I don't need a Learjet. I don't even need a Cessna at this point. But that perspective is very much the attitude of hope. And I want to give you a completely opposite perspective. Take me to Africa and introduce me to a child who has not eaten in 2 days. And that child finds out that I eat 3 meals a day and I have access to snacks in between. That child would look at me and say, that perhaps is the richest man in the world. And I would suggest to you that both Bill Gates and that child are neither one wrong. Depending on my perspective, I'm extremely poor or I'm extremely rich. Perspective does play a great deal into hope. And I'm here to tell you that unless you have the right perspective, you probably are not going to have the right hope. You have to put into a perspective of God, of what life is supposed to be like, and what it is supposed to be a hopeful person. When Solomon says that God is my portion, and therefore I will hope in him, what Solomon is saying is, no matter what bad comes about my way, and Solomon saw some bad stuff, arguably he was also one of the richest men in the world. And that tells me that being rich isn't always necessarily a problem solver. It can cause as many problems as it solves. But the perspective that Solomon had to gain was to look and say, where do I put my hope? I want to read 2 Corinthians 4, 7 through 18. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show us that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying the body of the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies. For we live and are always being given over to the death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you. Since we have the same spirit of faith, according to that which has been written, I believed, and so I spoke. We also believe, and so also speak. Knowing that he raised the Lord Jesus and raised us with Jesus to bring us with you into his presence. For it is all your sake that the grace extends to more and more people. It may increase in thanksgiving to the glory of God. So we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond comparison. As we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are unseen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. Now, when Paul wrote that, he was having nothing but trouble. Paul had spent most of his life being driven out, and, excuse me, I'm having some trouble with my throat. Not sure that's going to help or not. It's also my stomach. But Paul wrote that after being whipped, beaten, stoned, shipwrecked. You know, if I were going through Paul's shoes, I might look at God and say, hey, God, give me a break here. I'm doing your work. And yet, it is part of what Paul had to go through. Even though he was doing God's work, he did have hard life. He did have to face hard and unfun times. And I will tell you that I don't come by hope easily. I developed a cynical, hopeless outlook early on in life. Most of you have heard of Murphy's Law, which is anything that can go wrong will go wrong. I always thought Murphy's Law was a little bit too optimistic, so I wrote Baki's Law. Anything that can go wrong already has, I just don't know it yet. Now, I'm here to tell you that Baki's Law is not based on hope, nor is it based on trusting God. In fact, it is the epitome of the lack of faith and hope. And as I've grown in God, I've realized that Baki's Law really is a denial of God's power. And it allows me to focus on my immediate problems instead of hoping in God's promise. We are a people who are promised by God that he will care for us and he will carry us through. Probably no other scripture speaks that so wonderfully is Isaiah 40, 28 through 31. Have you not heard? Or have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who may not increase in strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Isaiah is telling me that no matter what, there is hope, because my God is still in charge. But we go back to that perspective, you see, and if you do not have the right perspective, all the words of hope are nothing more than words. I could read in a book today that someday I will own a unicorn. Now, the likelihood of that happening is slim to none, because unicorns don't exist. In the same fashion, many people read their Bibles and go, God says he will hold me up. I will faint and not be weary. And they see that in the same vein as, well, maybe somebody's promising me a unicorn. It is terrible that we as Christians do not rely on our God, that we don't trust him, that we don't hope in him as we should. But that's partially because today it is hard to find churches that are actually preaching the Bible. In fact, I would suggest to you that the number of churches that are preaching that the Bible is the inerrant Word of God, that Jesus Christ died on a cross for our sins, you will find fewer and fewer of those churches today than ever before. And that's a sign that people have abandoned the hope of God for the hope of man. And I'm here to tell you that in all faces, man fails. I have yet to see any time where I could put my faith in other people, including myself, by the way, where I did not become disappointed. Men, mankind, women, or if you want to put it there, all will fail you. It is part of it. And because of that, we live in a world that are so hopeless. I heard a statistic the other day that 1/4 of college kids have not only contemplated suicide, but have actually worked out a viable plan for it. Now, when you're talking 25% of your college-age kids have actually not only considered it, but come up with a plan for it, that should just shock you to your core. Why is it that these young people have no hope? Why is it that these people question their life? This is a statistic that has never before been to this level. We live in a time where the mankind and the world who promises us everything has failed us. And you know what? It is sad because these people are not hearing the one true place that they can get hope. I was sharing with Alta the other day. I said, you know, there's people older than me who I can talk to and have never heard the story of David and Goliath. They've never heard of Joshua. They've never heard of, well, they've heard of Adam and Eve, but they don't know the story. They've never heard because they've never been in the church. We are now seeing kids who are becoming grandparents, whose parents did not take them to church, did not teach them about God, and now their kids and their grandkids are growing up not knowing and not hearing about God. Excuse me. When that attitude starts to infiltrate the church, and it is, we remove the only place that you can truly find hope. So much of the world today will argue that we're trying to be something that we Do you fear wars? Oh, there's people out there working on trying to fight war. They're trying to end war. I love, if you've ever heard of the story Star Trek, it was written by Gene Roddenberry. And Gene Roddenberry said by the 23rd century, we would have eliminated war, we would have eliminated crime, we would have eliminated poverty, because mankind would have ascended to a higher level and we would just have solved all those problems. He wrote that in the 60s. Well, that's a few years ago. And I would suggest to you the world is in a worse place today than it was in the 60s. Gene Roddenberry's hope that man would eventually fix problems is failing. If you're looking for mankind to fix your problems, you are going to be disappointed. The very people who literally are trying to defend us and keep us safe from pandemics, it is now fairly common in the news service to suggest that it was a lab leak that caused the last pandemic. So the very few people that were trying to keep us safe caused the last pandemic. That doesn't give me a lot of hope, especially when I know that they went back to that same lab and are working on new viruses. It makes me a little nervous and wonder just how long till the next one. If you look at crime, we see crime ever increasing. And if you put your hope in that mankind can fix that, maybe hire more police officers, maybe do more things, and yet where some of the greatest laws are, the most crime exists. We are not, by mankind, doing a good job of fixing it. And I do know that even in the 70s, when I was a police officer, there were psychiatrists who said, if only we can solve this problem, if only we can solve that problem. LBJ in the 60s, when he started the welfare program, said, just get these people out of poverty and they will get back on their feet and they will do well. And yet there are more people on welfare today than ever imagined in the 60s. Mankind, if you're putting your hope in mankind, my friends, you are in fact hopeless. Because mankind does not have the best track record. So, if I don't trust man to solve wars, to solve crime, to solve illness, if I cannot trust man to do all those things, and in fact should be realizing that in fact they will probably make things worse, I have to figure out what I can hope in. Or is there anything? And I'm here to tell you, just as Solomon said in Lamentations, true hope only comes from God. And I'm here to tell you that Murphy's Law and Baki's Law will apply to most of what you see. And that really shouldn't surprise or discourage you. Because what the Bible tells me is that that's going to happen. The world you live in is going to get even messier. In fact, if you look at Ezekiel, if you look at Daniel, if you look at Revelation, they will tell you of a world that makes this one look like a utopia. It will tell you of a world that is full of anger, crime, war, hatred. It will tell you of a time that to come that is not yet here, where things are not going to be good. But like I said, that should not discourage you and me. This world may seem like it's out of control, and mankind may feel like he's outside of God's sovereign rule. I must understand that as a Christian, I am not guaranteed a problem-free life. Paul lived what I would consider a very problematic life. He spent most of his ministry being attacked, trying to be killed. He spent most of his time being hated and driven out of cities. In fact, most of the early Christians were killed for their faith. All the disciples, except one, were murdered and martyred for their faith, because that's what it took to be a Christian. And I'm here to tell you that that's not gone away. There are Christians in China, Malaysia, in the Middle East, and Russia that are still dying because they're telling others about Jesus. We have become complacent in the U.S. as of late. And because we have become complacent, that is why our hope and faith have waned. We are trying to live in a world that no longer exists. I've talked many times about the grandmother's church. And most of you grew up in a grandmother's church. And you know that well because Grandma was that dear old lady that made sure her kids and her grandkids, and perhaps even her great-grandkids, were in church on Sunday morning with her. And oh, woe to them if they were not, because Grandma would come talking. And they would be in there next Sunday. That was Grandma's church. And like I said, most of you grew up in that environment where that was the expected place for you to be. You were understandably supposed to be on church on Sunday because that's where everybody else was. But I'm here to tell you, as you can see looking around, churches are getting smaller and smaller. Every day, a new church shuts down. And I'm here to break it to you, that is going to continue. If you want to go around the state looking for empty churches, you will not have to look hard. And I would like to tell you that you and I are immune to that, but we are not. The sad truth about faith and hope is that unless we face a challenge to that faith and hope, we don't often exercise our faith and our hope. When a Chinese man shares 3 pages out of a Bible that they smuggled in, he risks his life to take that Bible to someone else and to preach it. His hope is not in the fact that his life's going to get better. His hope is in the words on those pages of that Bible. And it says, my God is in charge. My God is taking me home one day. My God is allowing me to go through some hard times here, but I have a hope that supersedes all the troubles that I face. We cannot, as Christians, live complacent and easy lives and live in hope. The truth of the matter is, for a Christian, trials are a good thing. And that isn't something I want to hear. It's not something I want to preach. But I'm here to tell you, the harder your life is, the more assuredly you're going to learn to trust in God. You've heard of the term the foxhole conversion. In war, so many people facing death said, oh Lord, just get me out of this and I'll do whatever you ask. And that worked really well in the battlefield. And in fact, a few of those people did come back and did serve God. But far too many, when life got easy again, forgot that foxhole conversion. And they went back to just being complacent. We tend to worry about the world around us and the problems. And I'm not suggesting you shouldn't. I'm not suggesting that because you don't put your hope in politicians that you shouldn't vote and do the best you can to make the government better. That is part of our obligation as good Christians to do that. But make no mistake, you're not going to be saved by a politician. You're not going to be delivered by a doctor that solves a cure. You're not going to be saved from the next calamity by some great man who does wonderful things. If you're a Christian, your hope is in Jesus Christ. Romans 15:13 says it so well. May the God of hope fill you with all joy, peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope. I don't know about you, but in these days, I kind of would like to abound in hope. I would kind of like to have the hope of God so overwhelm me that I don't see the problems around me as overwhelming. To do that, though, I must answer the question, does hope still exist? And I'm here to tell you the answer to that. Yes, hope does exist, but only in the God of the Bible and the promises he gave us. If your hope is in anything else, if you trust in anything else to get you through your world, my friends, you will be disappointed. You will be let down. You will decide that it is not working out well. Because mankind does not have a good track record. And I don't mean to be very obnoxious about it, but unfortunately so often when mankind goes to fix something, he breaks something and do it. We've never seen a situation where we have man fixing major problems. In fact, if anything, we see mankind destroying. The man who invented dynamite said, I think I've just invented the cure for war. This will be so horrific that no war will ever exist again because the power of this dynamite will just shatter man and say, no way. He developed dynamite, if I'm correct, in the late 1800s. And you don't have to be a real history buff to know that we've had a few wars since then. In fact, we've had 2 world wars since then. And the last world war was built with something even more powerful than dynamite, which was atomic power. Man keeps trying to fix the problem, and unfortunately, he exasperates it. If you're going to have hope, my friends, and you can have hope, make that very abundantly clear if I didn't make it clear before, you can have hope in this day and age. You can trust that you are being guided through this time. If. There's always that if or that but, right? If you trust God. If your trust is in mankind, your hope is gone. But I'm here to tell you, you can trust the God of the Bible. He has promised to carry us through, and he has promised to take us out of this world eventually and deliver us into heaven. My only hope is in Jesus Christ. Your only hope is in Jesus Christ. The question is, will you take that hope? Will you live that hope? Thank you.